Everybody, it's Daren Baker of dbaker Designs coming at you again from the Ham Shack. We're going to the next big phase of doing this sort of urban industrial style table made with plywood. If you remember what we talked about on the last video, we had taken all these plywood slats, about 1 7/8 inches wide, laminated them, turned them on their sides, and laminated them together. So we're having an end grain top. Okay, so what I've done now is I've taken the clamps off of the piece. It's been about 72 hours. Took a couple days off and let it dry. Now it's probably a good thing too because it's been about 40 degrees out. So it gives the glue a little bit more time to adhere to dry and hopefully not to freeze. So let me show you where we're at. Once you take the clamps off, this is what you're going to see. This is the bottom side of the table, or what's going to be the bottom side of the table. So you can see all the bead glue coming up, okay? And then you're going to see lots of little valleys. If you look closely on there, you'll see some valleys, like right there, and some peaks. That's where either the wood shifted or I did a really crappy job cutting it, okay? So that can be corrected. Now, the first phase after you've taken those clamps off is I'm just going to take a chisel or a scraper, a paint scraper of some sort, and I'm just going to take that excess beading off. Okay. Then I'm going to go into using my planer, my hand planer. Now, if you've got an electric planer, great. If you've got something that will really remove the material, the high pieces of it, like a hand-operated belt sander, that will really come in handy. I don't have those. I just have the planer for right now. And what I did here is I started to plane those peaks down. Now, again, on the underside here, I'm not worried about the valleys. I'm just worried about the peaks and trying to get everything leveled out. There's going to be a couple spots where the table curves in where I might want to come back and concern myself with that. But for initial purposes, not a big concern. So I've taken that down. One thing to keep in mind is to go at a 45 to a 65 degree angle when you're planing. The reason being is if you don't, you try to go with the grain, you're going to get big pocks like this. If you try to go at a 90 like that, you're going to get big pocks like this. Okay, so go at an angle. The reason being is with plywood, you've got sheets of wood that go vertically, then horizontally, vertically, horizontally, and keep going back and forth to give it that strength that it needs. So by going at a 45, you can avoid a lot of this pocking. Another way to do it is to keep your blade setting a little bit higher up and make sure that your blade is super sharp, which this is not super sharp. The setting is deep, and I've been going at it pretty aggressively. When I go to switch to the top side of the table, I'm going to bring that blade back, I'm going to resharpen that blade, and I'm going to be a lot more careful. Third stage of getting this kind of level and cleaned up is taking your sander. Now again, if you got a belt sander, that's even better. I've got the orbital sander here that I'm using. I've got a 60 grit, so I'm just taking it down, rough sanding it. This is pretty darn smooth. There's a couple of valleys here, but part of that is going to get cut off again by the shape, so I'm not too concerned about the corners. So those are the three main stages of treating the backside or the underside of the table once you get the clamps off. So once I get that whole thing done, then I'll flip it. We'll start the next video. You can see how I address the top side. While it was drying, let me show you what I was doing. This is the base. So I took those pipes that I showed you in the first video and I've attached them. I've threaded them, or not threaded them, but I've screwed all the pieces together. A couple things you want to make sure of, because you've got all these different threads, they're not all perfect. Case in point here is this guy right here. This centerpiece, the threading was all jacked up on the inside. I didn't catch that until after I had attached it and glued it. Went to take it apart and it's just all messed up. So I'm going to have to return these three pieces and try to get them to refund my money so I can buy them all over again and get that last leg done. Otherwise, I'm just out about $5. So what you want to do when you're doing this is make sure that all your heights from the floor or table, in this case, to center of this piece are the exact same height. And to here, try to make sure that that's the same height. And ultimately, the two things that you need to make the same height, not just this joining piece, but the bottom. Now this is upside down right now. I've got everything drying. I used a threaded glue to attach everything. Then I threaded it in. Now the tools that you're going to want to make sure that you're using, you're going to want to make sure you got a couple of these guys right here, a couple of these good heavy pipe wrenches, monkey wrenches, whatever you want to call them. You might even need to come in and just to tweak it a little bit, knock the end of that wrench with a hammer in a couple of spots, just to make sure that the fitting and the angle and everything is at 90 degrees how you need it to be. So while this guy dries, I got to go to the hardware store. I got to replace those stinking parts and finish the bottom side of the table. That'll push us on to the next video, and you'll see how we address the top, how we attach this, how we clean up the metal a little bit, and well, stick around. It's going to be fun. All right, we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.